Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a deep, high-tech, and honestly kind of trippy investigative dive into the canine cannabinoid frontier. I'm your clinical research associate, and we are dissecting a totally fascinating compound, CBG. We've got to ask the big, provocative question right out of the gate. Is this so-called mother cannabinoid an actual biological miracle and a literal lifesaver for our dogs? Or is it just a massive regulatory trap waiting to spring on unsuspecting brands? To figure this out, we need to balance the raw science with the harsh industry reality. So, I'm joined today by our senior extraction technician who knows the absolute reality of the lab, and Paul Miller from Bay Canine, who's going to help us understand the macro business strategy. Let's start with the biology, right? CBGA, or cannabigerolic acid, is the unadulterated, heat-free mother of all cannabinoids. Scientifically speaking, it's the biosynthetic precursor to CBDA, THCA, the whole shebang. But preclinically, this is an absolute behavioral goldmine. It actually shows the potential to inhibit GABA reuptake. What does that mean? It means it could create this profoundly uplifting calm in dogs, completely avoiding that heavy lethargy you sometimes see with standard CBD. Okay, hold on. From a cannabis quality and extraction standpoint, let's pump the brakes on the goldmine talk for a second. You're looking at preclinical potential, but I've got to look at the extraction reality. The hard fact is, mature hemp yields less than 1% CBG. Since it naturally converts into other cannabinoids as the plant grows, you have to harvest early. And that severely drives up extraction costs compared to standard CBD. It's rare, it's expensive, and the current supply chain, it just isn't built for it yet. And frankly, looking at the source material we have out there, it is a liability minefield. Just look at the red flags. There's a terrifying lack of veterinary disclaimers regarding dangerous drug interactions, especially if a dog is already on NSAIDs, sedatives, or seizure meds. Even worse, there's a glaring omission of the FDA's complete regulatory silence on animal cannabinoids. Encouraging groomers or trainers to recommend this without a vet consult? That's reckless. Paul, from a deep dive consulting perspective, how on earth do we navigate this liability? The technician hit the nail on the head regarding the risks of playing in the generic pet CBD space. The strategy here dictates a massive executive pivot. We have to completely evolve away from being just another trendy lifestyle pet CBD with, cute cartoon dogs on the packaging. To bypass those exact liabilities and establish true market dominance, the strategic move is to reposition entirely as a clinical-grade raw CBA research brand. To pull this off, you can't just sell products anymore. You must sell data. You must sell efficacy and undeniable clinical purity. And that pivot is exactly what allows us to lean into the incredible medical mechanics. Take the inside-out protocol. Internally, raw CBG has a documented, legitimate affinity for gut CB2 receptors, which is absolutely amazing for things like inflammatory bowel models. And externally, it's been studied for disrupting bacterial quorum sensing, particularly against really tough bugs like staph. It actively destroys surface yeast and hotspot bacteria right on the skin. The dual biological action here is just remarkable. It's remarkable, sure, but it's also highly dangerous if you just cross-contaminate formulas. If a brand tries to carry over an equine heritage formula, like one that's trusted to relieve inflammation in a 1,200-pound barrel horse, straight into a canine product, they are going to hit a biological wall. Those classic equine formulas often rely on strong essential oils like eucalyptus. For a dog, that creates a severe, potentially fatal toxic ingestion risk if it's used heavily or swallowed. You can't just swap the label. Right, and that's exactly why our R&D pivot includes a formulation counterstrike. We completely strip out those equine scents and essential oils. The whole shebang, gone. Instead, we utilize a 100% gastrointestinal safe, strictly unscented liposomal or MCT base for our canine foundation tincture. This dog-safe baseline completely neutralizes the toxicity concerns that skeptical veterinarians are inevitably going to raise, keeping the research brand's reputation totally bulletproof. Exactly, and this dog-safe approach is perfect for conquering the canine dental frontier. With 80% of dogs over age 3 suffering from periodontal disease, CBG's ability to stop plaque bacteria from communicating is literally revolutionary. Whoa, hold up. Let's get the biology right before we start celebrating. The source guide cites Streptococcus mutans, right? That is a human cavity pathogen. The dominant canine periodontal bugs are actually Porphyromonas, Treponema, and Tannerella species. We absolutely cannot use human health data for dogs. Plus, raw hemp extracts taste incredibly bitter and earthy. You are going to face extreme taste rejection from picky dogs if you just try to put raw CBG straight into their mouths. And we bypass that exact bottleneck through superior product engineering. A true research brand doesn't just bottle bitter hemp and hope for the best. We isolate the raw CBG, putting it into a completely tasteless and odorless formulation for a water additive, or we embed it into a highly palatable beef and sweet potato liposomal matrix for a soothing teeth gel. We engineer out the taste rejection entirely while maintaining that clinical efficacy. It's a total R&D goldmine. That kind of precision engineering sets the stage for even deeper neurological applications. I want to introduce something really exciting, the Synaptic Ocular Spectrum, or SOS. It's a 3-category perceptual framework that moves veterinary medicine way beyond the simple binary diagnosis of flycatcher syndrome in breeds like Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. It actually distinguishes between handler-induced fixation loops, environmental perceptual distortion, and true synaptic misfires in the visual cortex. It's a game changer. And what's absolutely amazing here is the lipid connection. Peer-reviewed research shows that omega-3s like DHA and EPA impact myelin sheath integrity and actually raise seizure thresholds by reducing inflammatory cytokines.
Okay, time for a clinical reality check. Yes, DHA deprivation lowers seizure thresholds in rodent models, but connecting that directly to spaniel lipid metabolism and flycatcher syndrome, that is currently an unstudied original clinical observation. It's a brilliant hypothesis, for sure, but it absolutely requires scientific anchoring and formal, rigorous study before we start presenting it as established fact to veterinarian neurologists.
If you want anchored science, let's look at the hard data from the 2026 University of Toronto study. It shows a massive breakthrough. They use the standard maximal electroshock seizure model. When you combine CBD with CBG at a precise 1-to-1 ratio, it actually reduces the required anti-seizure dose of CBD by a massive 50%. Think about that. They work additively, meaning you need half as much CBD to achieve the exact same seizure protection. But there is a severe toxicity caution we've got to acknowledge here. That same additive combination effect also reduces the toxic dose, the TD50, by 40%. That means the therapeutic window narrows significantly. Brands aren't just making a haphazardly better product. They are navigating a dangerously narrow clinical window that demands absolute precision in their milligram dosing. One wrong move, and you cross into toxicity. Let's pull back to the macro business perspective. When we compare market positioning, standard CBD is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but it's maturing, and it's incredibly crowded. CBG, however, it's projecting a massive 7 to 25% compound annual growth rate through 2030. Between its higher solubility, which is a huge advantage for topicals and beverages, and this incredible dose reduction capability we just talked about, CBG is perfectly positioned to disrupt the entire mature CBD market. And here is the real strategic secret. The pharmaceutical CBD industry built its legitimacy on the entourage effect, which traditionally required THC. But THC is a massive legal and psychotoxic liability in the pet space. As the science reveals, CBG has secretly become the ultimate non-psychoactive potentiator the market has been desperately seeking. It completely solves the industry's THC liability problem by boosting efficacy without any of the psychoactive high. Which brings us to the ultimate strategic endgame, the omega-CBG market convergence. By merging established omega fatty acids with the raw mother cannabinoid, we are directly capitalizing on the neuroinflammatory pathway. We take the established science of omegas and the new anti-seizure credentials of CBG to create highly targeted combinations. This strategy allows a brand to completely dominate the untapped veterinary neurology and cognitive dysfunction market. To execute this transition successfully, my uncompromising executive leadership mandate is fourfold. First, discard the standard pet industry paw print aesthetics for sterile, white coat clinical packaging. Second, implement radical transparency. Third, you absolutely must establish a formal veterinary advisory board with a holistic vet and behaviorist to validate the brand. And fourth, launch a grassroots citizen science beta test. I vigorously agree on that radical transparency requirement. From a quality control standpoint, it is everything. The strategy here is implementing the QR code moat. Step 1, you place a prominent QR code on every single bottle. Step 2, when scanned, it links directly to an ISO-certified third-party certificate of analysis. Step 3, it proves the exact raw CBGA levels and the total absence of heavy metals or pesticides. This is literally the only definitive way to build a competitive moat against cheap, generic Amazon brands. And that citizen science beta test strategy, it's incredibly powerful for building real trust. Documented, video-backed case studies from a grassroots beta test can actually bypass those 10-year, multi-million-dollar FDA trials in the court of public opinion. Having 50 owners submit weekly symptom tracking surveys and video diaries proving real-world efficacy is arguably far more persuasive to a struggling dog owner or a trainer than any dense scientific paper could ever be. That wraps up our explainer on the mother cannabinoid and its true market potential. I'll leave pet industry developers and business owners with this final provocative challenge. Knowing the preclinical science, the harsh extraction reality, the liability risks, and the massive market trajectory, will your brand have the courage to adapt? Will you lead the clinical vanguard with radical transparency and grassroots data? Or will you simply get left behind in the generic lifestyle CBD dust? The choice is entirely yours.